Yo, what is up? It is your boy Zether, back with a brand new video. Now, as you can tell from the title, this is going to be what if Deku had Panther Sage mode. This is going to be an original idea of mine. Of course, it's inspired by the Naruto verse and Toad Sage mode, as well as Snake Sage mode. However, this is going to be my own version of Sage mode, Panther Sage mode. It's essentially going to be the same as Toad Sage mode, except it's going to be speed based, where I believe that different versions of Sage mode specialize in different things. So this version is going to specialize more in speed, stealth, and quick takedowns instead of like long brute strength and healing, just like the Katsumi or Katsuyu or something like that would have done. And that is exactly how my Panther Sage mode is going to work. Now, also, one more thing that I really want to explain, that I really want to get out there, so a lot of you guys won't be confused, like, what's going on? Like, doesn't he need chakra for this? Well, basically, this is going to be a little bit of a thing that I'm just going to explain now. It's basically going to be like normal Sage mode, but the aura that's going to be around him is going to be black and purple. Also, he's going to have the ability to turn into a shadow, so when I pull that out later, make sure to know that, this is not just going to be random. I wanted to add this since this is my own version of Sage mode. I decided I would make this, very, very strong. One more thing to add. He's not going to have chakra. In this version, Sage creatures and Sage users will not need chakra. It will be nothing but, natural energy from the world. Just like everything that everybody has, like trees, water, just like it was explained in the Naruto verse. That being said, I also want to give a huge shout out to my boy, Pothead_Artist32. He made me the amazing artwork that you guys see, the Deku with the sexy outfit. I mean, come on now, you guys know that shit go hard. Now, he made that pretty dope, pretty dope thing. That's essentially what Deku's gonna look like in the series. And I just want to really give him a shout out. Make sure that you guys go check him out. He makes pretty dope artwork, and that is the link to his Instagram that I'm going to be leaving down below. That being said, let's go ahead and officially get started. Okay, boys. So, where this story is going to start off, it's going to actually start off when Deku was about 4 years old. Now, at this current time, Deku would have actually already been told that he's actually quirkless, and Deku would have actually just been, being home. It would have been about 2 weeks, and he would have actually been bullied for a little while now. Now, at this point, Hisashi Midoriya would have actually gotten home. And this is when he would tell his family that, he actually got a little bit of a break from work. As, Inko and Deku would actually be very happy since, they don't usually get to see Hisashi that much. So, they would actually all decide that they're going to, go on a little bit of a family trip since he's going to have about 1 week off. They decide to book a trip and go straight to, I didn't think this far ahead. Oh, anyways, they would go on a trip, and the trip would essentially be, I don't know where. I'm not gonna lie to you guys, I have no clue where I want the trip to be, but just keep in mind that it's gonna be anywhere that has a jungle. The Amazon, no, is that a jungle? No, it's basically gonna be a jungle. Please don't clown me for what I just said. It's going to be a jungle. Anyways, okay, like it's going to be a jungle, and they're going to have like a tour guide where they're basically going to explore, see the animals, see everything that there is to see. They're going to have a pro hero with them just in case, any, wild animals with quirks come in and attack. So it's all going to be perfectly safe. They'd be staring at, giant, buildings, old things from centuries ago. They would also be looking at, the amazing view. There'd be a giant lake where they could all just relax and unwind. Now, Deku would actually be having an amazing time. He'd actually be having the time of his life. As, during this time, Deku would still be obsessed with All Might. And, he would actually be, sitting down at the lakeside as he would be watching a video of All Might. Just laughing, the one that he always watches. As, out of nowhere, gradually in about 2 hours, the sky would begin to change, when out of nowhere, everybody would just assume that it's going to be fine. They would look at the weather forecast and it would be strange. It would be a sort of weather anomaly. This is when out of nowhere, Deku and the rest of the tourists would have a huge amount of gust of wind just coming in out of nowhere as a giant, let's go tornado, hurricane. Let's just go, a giant natural disaster would be coming their way. Now, this is when many of them would be swept off their feet and be blown very far away, as Deku and his family would just be hugging together as they're trying to stay there, trying to get behind a tree, maybe get a little bit of support. But as things very, very quickly escalated. It was very clear that they were not going to escape this. This is not happening. As Inko would look at Deku and say, I love, as she was blown away by the gust of wind, and Sasaki and Deku were just sitting there like sitting ducks, as Deku would be crying, thinking, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. As Sasaki would tell him that it's okay, like he's there for him. As Deku would smile as he then looks at his father, who then gets blown away alongside with Deku. Now, this is when Deku would actually decide that, you know, he has to make it out of this alive. So Deku would proceed to go in front of the tree, the biggest tree that he could find, as he stands behind it, the opposite direction that the wind is blowing, as he's just trying to get any sort of, you know, advantage to make him not die. That's all he's looking for. He just doesn't want to be taken out by this. Now, this is when Deku would have a sort of debris just flung at his head, as Deku would pass out and just be laying there. This is when Deku would wake up hours later in a sort of cave, you could say. As Deku would be staring around, as he would say, where am I? As he rubs his head that just got hit. It was not bleeding, and he was just wondering why that was. As Deku would then be looking around, as he then out of nowhere sees a panther. As Deku would see a giant cat approaching him, double the size of a normal panther, as Deku would just simply just be staring at it, just in awe of what he's seeing. I mean, he's seeing a giant beast. It's nothing that he's ever seen before. As Deku would then proceed to, you know, wonder what's going on. As, you know, he would proceed to wander as the panther just begins to come close to him. Deku would try to stay still, maybe trying to not get attacked by it, as the panther would then walk up to him, as Deku would proceed to just stare at it like a reindeer in headlights of a car, as he can't move, he's frozen by fear. As out of nowhere, the panther would begin to stare at him and speak, as Deku would immediately pass out. He would be like, I'm dreaming, as Deku would proceed to pass out instantly. This is when the panther would notice that Deku would have instantly passed out, as a couple more would come in out of the shadows and say, take him outside, he doesn't belong here. As some of them would say that he has nowhere to go. You saw what happened, his family died. As the rest of them would be extremely insensitive of the situation, as one of the panthers, the leader actually, would proceed to say, what's all of this commotion about? As Sadimus, that's the name of the leader panther, which is basically translate to God of the Shadows. And Sadimus would proceed to look at Deku, as he then says, let the boy stay. For a while at least, as the rest of the creatures would just look at him and say, very well, master. As they would all walk by. A couple of hours would go by, as Deku would wake up, as he would see the giant behemoth of a panther just staring at him, as Deku would proceed to look at it and say, what are you? As it would say, my name is Sadimus. I am the Shadow Panther, the Sage, the Black Sage Panther. As Deku would look at him and say, are you real? Do you have a quirk? Like, how are you able to talk? As the panther would look at him and in a sort of turning his head, like just confusion. As Deku would stare at him and say, quirk, you know what a quirk is, right? As the panther would straight stare at him, as Deku would explain what it is. As the panther would just look in awe, as he would say, humans have powers? What happened to just normal humans? As Deku would say, what do you mean? As it would begin to just stay quiet, as the rest of the panthers would realize that, you know, the humans have gained power. As Deku would proceed to say that, ask, where is he? Where is this? As the panthers would proceed to tell him that the place where he finds himself at the moment, is actually the home of the panthers. As Deku would look around and say, so you guys live in this cave? As there would be a sort of skylight on the roof. It was a naturally created one, at least. As Deku would look around and he would see that it was, you know, it was quite beautiful. As Deku would proceed to look around and ask, like, why did he survive? Like, how's he still alive? As the panthers would then approach him as they say that, we took you in. We saw what happened. The incredible storm. It swept you, your parents, and many of the rest, you were the only survivor. As Deku would look down in sheer horror as he thinks, Mom, Dad. Now, this is when the Panther would approach him and say, listen, child, this is no time to be thinking about how things were before. You have to look towards the future and not fall towards what happened today. This was nothing but a mere setback. Things are only going to get better from here. As Deku would sob as he goes in to hug the Panther, as it's just looking at him as it just lets it happen. As Deku would proceed to ask, so what's going to happen? Are they going to kick him out? Is he going to have to fend for himself? As they would tell him that they're actually going to train him so that he can fend for himself and not have to rely on them. As Deku would smile and say, what do you mean train me? What are you going to teach me? As the Panther would turn into a shadow and proceed to knock Deku off of his feet. As Deku would say, what? What's going on? You're a shadow. As the Panthers would then proceed to look at him, as Deku would say, that's incredible. It's such an amazing quirk. As the Panthers would say, this is not a quirk. As Deku would say, yeah, it's an incredible power. How did you attain this? As the Panthers would then proceed to tell Deku that this is something that can be achieved through sheer training. As Deku would then proceed to say that it's like that of a legend. It's unheard of. It's unnormal. As Deku would just be staring at them. This would basically lead us into the next couple years. And the next couple years would essentially be spent with Deku being raised as a normal child, easing into the training, since at this point, he is 4 years old. So at this current point, they're simply feeding him as much as his body needs and essentially, training the boy, telling him to stay in perfect shape, because without that, he won't be able to achieve the power that he's gonna need to use later on. Now, we're gonna go ahead and skip over to when Deku is about 7 years old. During this time, Deku would have actually ended up training. Sorry, I said actually. Anyways, Deku would have ended up training there in the sort of way that, Naruto would have trained for his Sage Mode. Except in this version, they would focus a lot more on speed and technique, as well as concealing your presence and, trying to be as quiet and deadly as possible. Deku would have noticed that that's what their training consists of, and Deku would ask why it's not based on more along the sides of strength. Why are they not more focused on strength and more on this speed instead of raw power? As the Panthers would tell him that is the style of the Black Panther Sage Mode. As Deku would say that it's incredible. As they would look at him, and as it would have been a couple of years. At this point, Deku would be in decent shape, as Deku would have gotten a little bit of more speed as well as strength. At this point, Deku would be about 8 years old, and Deku would not be your typical 8-year-old, since he would be extremely quick, fast, strong, and he'd have an amazing sense for hunting, since that's what the Panthers had to feed on. They hunt for their food. I mean, they are Panthers and they do act like humans. However, they do gotta get their own food themselves. They're not like us, where they live in a society where they can just pay for it. No, it doesn't work like that. They have to hunt. Therefore, Deku was trained in the art of hunting. As Deku would proceed to just learn how to hunt, how to conceal his presence, how to attack, how to strike. He would have spent this next couple years essentially learning everything that there is to do with that. Now, after this, Deku would now go on to more advanced levels of the Panther Sage Mode. This time, learning how to increase his speed and learning how to gather sage energy. As Deku would have actually ended up, learning how to gather natural and sage energy to, use for his benefit. And in terms of benefit, what I basically mean by that is, to use for the Sage Mode. As it doesn't just come by itself, it's earned. Now, as things go by, things don't really look that well. Now, Deku at first would have actually been struggling a lot at learning how to use this power of his, but in due time, he definitely would have actually ended up learning how to hone his skills, how to attack, how to strike, how to use strength. And at this current point, Deku would definitely be extremely strong. Now, a couple years would pass, and at this point, Deku would actually end up being about 13 years old. During the years, Deku would always talk about, the Hero Society, quirks, and how amazing it would be for him to get a quirk. As Sadimus would actually tell him that the power of the Sage is way more powerful than any flimsy quirk. As Deku would explain how heroic All Might is, how Deku wishes to become somebody like that someday. Deku wants to be the symbol of peace. He wants people to look at him and think that everything's okay. He wants to save everybody. As Sadimus would think that Deku is very pure of heart, as Deku would definitely be just like he was in canon, except this time Deku would be confident. He would be smarter. And during this time, Deku would have spent the time meditating as well as honing the normal abilities that he already has. It wouldn't be just spent on raw physical speed, raw strength. It would have been spent on mind, soul, and body. All of the elements in terms of learning the Panther Sage Mode would have been focused on, as well as his stealth. His stealth and speed would have been the greatest, however, since that is essentially what the Sage Mode specializes in, I guess you could say. Now, during time, Deku would have actually ended up becoming extremely powerful. At this current time, Deku was about Deku had about 45% of One For All's raw physical strength. He could destroy boulders. He could change. He could flick and create immense amount of wind pressure. Deku was unrivaled in strength by, the Panthers. For some reason, at this point, Deku was way beyond what anybody would have known. At this point, Deku would have actually ended up mastering the Panther Sage Mode, and his speed would be 100% of full Cowling. I'm not talking All Might's 100%. I'm talking Deku's 100%. So like two times that. So think 200% speed. However, when he accesses that form, black aura, black lightning blitzes off him. Think of it like a full Cowling, except this time it would be black aura as well as lightning that would just come off of him. The amount of energy that just erupts off of his body is immensely insane. Deku would have a lean but very shredded build, to the point where he was lean, but his body had muscle on muscle on muscle. He had 2% body fat, and Deku was an absolute beast. He was a lean, shredded beast who could blitz everybody. I mean, he couldn't exactly have the bulky All Might build if he's going to focus on speed. So Deku at this current point would actually look just like he does in the picture in the thumbnail. His body, his face, not his outfit. He still doesn't have that yet. Now, at this point, Deku would actually be about 14 years old. We're going to have a little bit of a skip. And this is when Deku would actually be approached by Sadimus, as he then tells him that it's time. He thinks that Deku's going to become one of the greatest heroes of all time, as he tells him to make him proud, to use that power wisely, and to never, ever let it fall into the wrong hands. As Deku just nods, as he then, smiles at them, hugging all of them and letting them know that he's going to miss them all very much. As Deku would proceed to walk out, he would walk out of the cave where he had lived for years. Now, don't think that Deku would be a sort of Inosuke type of character where, since he was raised by animals, he's going to be animalistic. No, he would have manners. He would definitely have gotten education way beyond anything that school could have taught him. They taught him real shit, and he's also very wise. He's a sage. I mean, come on now, that's just how it is. So at this current time, Deku would, decide that he's gonna go back to where he used to live. As Deku would proceed to, activate his speed, as he would proceed to just run in one general direction. After running for about 2 minutes, Deku would arrive in a road, as he sees a car driving by. Deku would proceed to, look at it as it was actually a police car. As Deku would stand right in front of it as the police car immediately turns on its brakes as it's like, "Kid, you could have died. Watch where you're walking." As Deku would then be shown to be wearing some very weird clothes. It would be the sort of outfit that Naruto was wearing when he was doing his Sage Mode training. As Deku would be wearing, more monk looking garments, I guess you could say. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to essentially tell the police officer that, there's a reason that he's like him, as he would proceed to ask him, like, why is he dressed like that? As Deku would say, I was actually wondering where the nearest, police station was. I was actually one of the survivors of the horrible natural disaster that occurred about 10 years ago. As the officer would open his eyes wide as he would say, You're a survivor? As Deku would look at him and smile as he then says, "Yeah, my parents died and I've actually survived there for all my life now that I think about it." As the police officer would then look at him and say, "Right away, I'll take you to them as soon as possible." As Deku would look at him and thank him for everything that he's doing. As Deku would proceed to smile. As Deku's just thinking that, he's finally going to go back to normal society. As Deku is happy, but at the same time, he knows that he has to stay true to his roots, He was raised by panthers as well as humans, so he's a sort of mix of the both, I guess you could say. So, Deku would actually arrive to the police station where he would tell them all that he has no close family to take care of him. His parents had died, and he goes to the quirk doctor where they register his quirk as a shadow power, where he's essentially able to turn himself into a shadow as well as super speed and enhanced strength. That is what they call his quirk. His quirk is named Shadow Mode, as Deku actually likes the sound of that. But Deku then proceeds to tell them that he would actually prefer it to be called Panther Mode. As they would look at him and tell him that he can name it if he wants. I mean, it's never been seen before. As Deku would smile and say thanks. Now, this is when Deku would actually be enrolled into an orphanage, where Deku would actually go to school just like any normal kid. Now, during this time, he would actually have to enroll in school for about a month, since the entrance exam for UA doesn't start for another month. So this is when Deku would proceed to, just go to normal school, have a normal life. He would not actually attend the same school as Bakugo, however, and he would actually go to a different school. Maybe, let's say, none of the school that any of our, 1A class members would go to. So Deku would essentially just be going through life like normal. In this version of events, the Sludge Villain, since Deku wasn't there, Sludge Villain would have actually gotten away, taken possession over some other kid's body, and All Might would have never caught them, meaning no Bakugo incident, no Deku, no dropping the sludge. Sludge Villain got away, and that's just how it is. So, we're going to go ahead and cut into one month later, since we don't want to hear about Deku being an orphan. It's kind of, not exactly the vibe that I like. So, anyways, that being said, we got Deku, who basically is just thrilled for the entrance exam, as his current teacher who's teaching him would proceed to say that, Izuku Midoriya, he actually wants to go to UA? As Deku would say that, yeah, it's been his dream since he can remember. As the teacher would smile, thinking that Deku could actually make it. He has an amazing quirk, and he's the smartest in the class, as Deku would just be smiling. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to just be thinking about things, as he would walk out of the class, and the very next day would actually be the day of the entrance exam. Deku would actually be extremely hype. He's getting one step closer to realizing his dream. Before, it seemed so far-fetched, like it could never happen, but now Deku was in reach. It was achievable. He had the power, he had the skill, he had the knowledge. He could do it, and he would do it. He would become the greatest hero of all time. He would make his father figure, Sedinus, proud, as Deku would smile, thinking that, everything that he's done has all been worth it. As Deku would proceed to hold his head up high as he then walks up to UA, as he looks at the building and he just smiles as he thinks that this is the beginning of a new chapter in his life. As Deku would just be smiling. Of course, he would be in an orphanage, but Deku wouldn't let that get him down. I mean, he would actually be very liked by all the kids there, as Deku would actually have made a couple of friends, and things were going very well for him. So now, this is when Deku would proceed to take the entrance exam. Now, as soon as everything is announced and Deku would go in for the written portion, Deku would actually end up acing it. Very easily, in fact. As Deku would actually get about 100% of the questions perfectly correct. As, Nezu would have been extremely shocked once he was grading the papers. I mean, this kid got everything right. That's insane. When was the last time that happened? Never, the first of Neverary? Like, that doesn't occur usually. So, Nezu would actually have a very keen eye set on Deku, as Deku would then go in for the physical portion of the exam. Now, as soon as everything started, Deku would proceed to just smile as he's there in the back, as he then proceeds to try to walk up to the front, when suddenly, a boy with glasses would proceed to stop him, telling him that he doesn't have to go, interrupt that girl. As Deku would look at him and say, raise an eyebrow, as he then says, what girl? As Ida would say, you were about to go interrupt that girl, am I incorrect? As Deku would say, no, I was just trying to go to the front. As Ida would then say, my apologies then. My name is Tenya Ida. I'm very sorry. As Deku would say, Izuku Midoriya. It's okay. As Deku would just smile. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to just be thinking about things. As, Deku would just straight be chilling for real. As, out of nowhere, President Mike then begins to say, go! There's no countdown in a real battle! Go, 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 go! As everybody would proceed to, blast off onto the robots. As Deku, he would not be holding anything back. Deku would instantly go into his Panther Sage mode, going 100%, being ready to destroy every robot that gets in his way and win. He has no other motive than to destroy and get the best ever. As Deku would activate his mode, the black electricity would crackle as his eyes would then begin to have a sort of concealed presence. This is when Deku would turn himself into a shadow and disappear, when out of nowhere, hundreds of robots would begin to explode in every direction as Deku would begin to massacre every single robot in sight. At this current time, Deku would have actually ended up getting about 1,769 robots, as everybody would just be staring as Deku's demolishing everything. Every time that they look at a robot, it would just destroy in an instant, as Deku would just, come in and slash them, punch them, elbow them, sweep them off their feet. He would just abolish them. He would destroy them completely. Now, this, however, is when Deku would proceed to smile, as after he destroyed almost every robot, this is when the ground would begin to rumble, as some of the other students, including Uraraka and everybody else who had passed, would actually end up getting a couple of robots. As, they would have gotten a couple, but all the extras, all the filler characters would have gotten about 0 robots. Uraraka would have gotten about 15 robot points, as, Deku would have actually seen that she was stuck under some rubble. This is when Uraraka would be like, Uraraka would proceed to scream out for help, as everybody would be running away from her. Deku would just stare at everybody as they're not helping her. None of them stood up. None of them showed their ability to become a hero. A true hero would have stepped in without regard for their own self. Obviously, they would have thought about that, but they would have put saving others ahead of their own safety, and especially in a hero exam where even if they did do that, they most likely wouldn't have gotten injured. As Deku would just think that this is an embarrassment. As Deku would proceed to think that he's not going to stand by and let that girl get hurt. As Deku would blitz over there as he turns into a shadow, grabs her, and takes her quickly as far away from the robot as he can possibly. And this is when Deku would proceed to run at the robot, as he then speed blitzes it, punching every single one of the robot's joints, making the robot fall down to its knees, as it then collapses onto its face flat. as Deku would just be standing there. Everybody would just be staring at Deku in nothing but a black hoodie, some, joggers, and some running shoes, as Deku would just have a drop of sweat fall down his face, as everybody would be saying, that's insane. This kid really just did all that and he had nothing but a drop of sweat? That is insane. As Deku would proceed to smile, thinking that he had to have passed. I mean, he aced the test as well as this one. I mean, if he didn't, then he clearly isn't meant to become a hero. As Deku would then proceed to smile as he then walks home, as everybody's just trying to ask him questions, but Deku would just be smiling and answering as many as he can. So we got Deku just chilling. So this is when Deku would proceed to go back to the orphanage for the next couple of days, as Deku would then proceed to get his letter come in, as the orphanage lady would walk in and she would say, Izuku, you got a letter. As Deku would say, oh, is it from UA? As she would say, yes, it's from UA. Hope you got in. As Deku would say, yeah, same here. As Deku would thank her for bringing him his letter, as he would then say, well, you want to read it with me? As she would say, oh, I couldn't. This is your business. I don't want to interfere. As Deku would say that, no, it's completely fine. She can watch it with him if she wants. As Deku would open the letter and she would just be standing over his shoulder. As Deku would then proceed to look, as a hologram would open, revealing All Might. As he would say, ha 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 ha, I am All Might. As All Might would then proceed to say, well, kid, you aced the written exam and you broke my record for robot points. As Deku would just be smiling, thinking that that's pretty cool. As she would just be like, you broke All Might's record? How are you not more excited? As Deku would say, well, I wasn't aiming for breaking a record. I was aiming for passing the test. So I'm not really too concerned about that. I just want to know if I got in. As All Might would then say, so obviously this means you got in, Izuku Midoriya. As Deku would just smile, as he then thinks that he's gonna make his father figure, Sadimus, proud. As Deku would smile, thinking that it's all coming down to this, He's gonna do it. He's gonna take his first steps towards becoming a hero. As Deku would smile and celebrate, as the orphanage would actually order a cake, as everybody would proceed to get one small slice, nothing too crazy. As everybody would just be celebrating Deku's, letting him into the orphanage. As everybody would say that when he becomes a pro hero, that he better not forget them. As Deku would proceed to smile and say that he'll never forget any of them. As Deku would then proceed to walk off for school. As I also forgot to mention, in the letter, All Might would have also told Deku that he actually got a full ride to UA, a 100% all paid for scholarship, since they know that Deku is in an orphanage. As Nezu would have definitely done a little bit of research on this Izuku Midoriya kid after seeing the performance. I mean, this kid is All Might on crack in the making. I mean, he cannot let this kid go by. As Deku would then just be smiling, as he would arrive to the dorms as a sort of dorm that actually would have been installed for Deku in about a week. So Deku would have waited about a week before school starts, as Deku would actually have ended up moving in there. Since he has a full ride, he never has to pay for food. He has full access to all of the UA facilities, meaning exercises, anything at all you guys can really think of, honestly. As this is definitely quite impressive. As Deku would just be unpacking. He would have a bed and anything necessary. As Deku would actually be designing his costume design during this time, as it would actually be the picture that you guys can all see in the thumbnail. As Deku would just be smiling, thinking that that's the one. Deku would turn in the costume idea, and this is when Deku would proceed to just be smiling. Now, after this, Deku would proceed to, Deku would proceed to just walk in, since we're going to cut back to normal Deku. He would walk into class, as he would open the door and see a young kid with blonde hair arguing with Tenya Ida, the kid who he had stopped him originally in the entrance exam. As Deku would be like, well, they're definitely rowdy, As Deku would just look over there, as Ida would turn to his attention to Deku and say, It's you, you're the boy. As Deku would say, hello Ida. As Ida would say, you're a far greater student than I am. As Uraraka would walk in and say, hey, it's that one kid, as Deku would look back and he would see her, as he would say, oh, hey. As she would thank him for saving him, and Deku would say, oh, there's no need for that. I mean, I did it because I'm a hero, right? As she would smile and say, yeah, but no, I still think you deserve the thanks for that, since if it wasn't for you, who knows what could have happened. As Deku would just smile and, laugh it off, as Aizawa would then wake up and say, if you're here to make friends, I suggest you leave now. As, what would have happened in the original canon would actually end up happening here. As Deku would proceed to just, be told by Aizawa that he needs to, go outside along with the rest of the class to go, take the thing. As Deku would just be thinking that, what about orientation? As Aizawa would say that we don't have time for orientation. We have 3 years to mold you guys into the perfect heroes. Perfect. We have 3 years to mold you guys into the perfect heroes. And that means training, educating you guys, and teaching you guys about how to use your powers. We don't have time for orientations or silly things to honor you. We got to get down to business. As everybody would just look at each other, as they would think that he's right. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to smile, thinking that he's gonna truly get down to, he's really gonna get down to the nitty gritty. As Deku would then proceed to, just be smiling. As he's then thinking that it's probably gonna be very fun to have this guy as his homeroom teacher. As they all go into the changing room and Deku takes off his clothes, and as he does, Kirishima looks at him, at his shredded, lean body, as he says, whoa, dude, I did not know you had that much muscle under your shirt. As Deku would just smile and say, oh, yeah, I work out a lot. As he would say, no kidding, man, you're ripped. As Deku would just smile. Now, this one they would all proceed to go outside, as Deku would be thrown the ball and told that he has to throw it as hard as he can. No really drawbacks or anything. He can use his quirk, but the only thing is he has to stay inside of the circle. As Deku would look at Aizawa and say, works for me. Now, this is when Deku would proceed to, just be chilling, as Deku would then, have his speed and his aura activate, as everybody can see the black electricity and dark purplish aura that just blasts off of Deku, as the everywhere begins to shake, as Deku is just letting out an immense amount of aura, as Deku is going insane at the moment. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Deku is definitely going insane. As Deku would then charge his arm back, as he then says, as he then throws the ball as hard as he can, getting about 1,069 meters. As everybody in the class would be like, that's insane. As Deku would then, smile, as Bakugo's looking at that and he says, 2,000 meters? As Deku would just be smiling as he walks back. Bakugo would think that he has to beat that brat. There's no way that anybody here can be better than him. As Bakugo would go in to throw the ball, and he would quickly realize that middle school life that he had, where he was the best and he was never challenged, he was never questioned, that is no longer the case. Bakugo is no longer the best. Now he has to face the facts or get stronger. As Bakugo would then proceed to look at Deku, as he then says, This is when Bakugo would just have a little bit of a rage fueling up inside him. As the rest of the test would go by, Uraraka would get Infinity during that, and Deku would see how there was a certain girl who would have actually used her quirk very proficiently, as she would have actually created things to help her with every single scenario and everything that goes down. As Deku would have looked at her and gotten a little bit of an interest in her, name being Momo Yaoyorozu. As you already know, boys, come on now, we gotta ship him with Momo. You already know, boys. Anyways, as Deku would then proceed to, just ace everything, as he would get first place, Momo getting second, and the rest of the order going as a canon. In this version of events, the Invisible Girl would have actually gotten expelled, since she does nothing in terms of the progression of the story. She really has no purpose being there. As, she would end up getting expelled, as, Deku would feel a little bad for her, but, there's nothing he could do about it. And this is when Deku would just smile, thinking that, you know, this is pretty cool. As out of nowhere, Aizawa would say that this is over. They need to report back to school tomorrow. Everybody who wasn't expelled. As she would actually walk off crying. Now, as soon as everything ends, Deku would proceed to basically walk back to the dorm system that he has. As Deku would just lay down in his bed and think about what had happened today. Reflect on everything that's happened in his life. The storm, being trained in Panther Sage mode, being enrolled in UA, getting a scholarship. I mean, yeah, there may have been some bumps in the road, but Deku's glad, you know. He wouldn't have gone any other way. As Deku then just smiles and says, well, let's see what tomorrow holds. And that's where we're going to be ending it off, boys. If you guys enjoyed this part, I hope you guys stick around for the next part that's going to be coming out tomorrow, depending on whether you guys hit the like goal. Like goal for this video is going to be 200 likes. If you guys can smash 200 likes, part 2 will be out tomorrow. If not, then, you know, too bad, so sad. That being said, it has been your boy Zether, and I'm out.